But for those of you who are new today, these town halls are for the members, by the members kind of thing. So when you have a comment or question, please camera up and mute off so that we can make you part of the permanent record. Somewhere around, I think the over-under today is 134 when Pat goes for our sandwich. So we'll all be looking for that. You'll get a feeling if you're new that this is a group of people that maybe know each other or like each other. Don't just wait till Adam chimes in, then you'll see what I mean. But no, generally speaking, these are casual conversations, which means everyone has an opportunity to contribute, and that takes a lot of pressure off of whatever member or members are kind of facilitating and leading the conversation. That said, you're in luck today because David Reed knows what he's talking about. He's the man. And David, I'm going to let you give a little bit of your background just for the people who don't know you. But for those of you who have heard David's name before, he's a part of our Academy membership and is more than willing to offer to help any member with a variety of topics. This year, we're going to be doing more with our Academy members, and I know we have a few of them on today. So thank you to all of you for being a part of that program. David's topic du jour today is on customer feedback. Again, he's going to take a deeper dive on some of this stuff. I asked him in the prep, are a lot of what he's seeing from his clients, are a lot of these organizations doing the things that he's recommending? And I think, David, your answer was yes and no. You can always do better, especially if you're taking the approach to continuous improvement. So, David, thanks for agreeing to let us volunteer you for this. And for those other Academy members, we want you to know that your turn at the wheel is coming. And for any member, we really want to encourage you to help drive a conversation on a topic or two. So without further ado, David, let me let you get started.
Well, great. Well, good to have everyone today. And just to give you a little of my background for those I don't know yet, I have degrees in chemical engineering and computer science from
Texas. David, you're going to lose them. Stop right there. We do not want to hear about real intelligence.
That's Texas A&M. All right, Giggle Maggies. Right. But my wife calls me a weird engineer because I kind of migrated to the people side of things shortly thereafter. But I've always been in the call center space. I've been working in that area for about 25 plus years and did a stint with Exxon. And then I had an opportunity to go work for Disney, and I ran some of their call centers at Walt Disney World in Florida. So my family loved being out there. My kids, we moved out there when the kids were 1 and 3, so getting free admission to Disney, and it was kind of a pretty nice perk for Dad's job. So I did enjoy that. And then 22 or 3 years ago, I left Disney and started my own business called Customer Centered Consulting Group, and I work with companies on largely customer service, process improvement, leadership development, and do DISC and some other programs out there. So it's been a lot of fun and love working with different organizations. And I enjoy even, working with the call center space, because that's really where I got started with a lot of my customer service passion. And I've written 4 books on customer service, and that's kind of a little bit about me. So we'll jump right into the topic today. So when we had our session a while back on measurements, and I did one on kind of talking through the different measurements, and then we kind of ended with, okay, we're getting a lot of data, but what are we doing with it? And I got the impression from a lot of people that probably not as much as we could was the answer I hear from a lot of people. So that's why I wanted to kind of shift on the topic today, is really talking through the customer service side of gathering feedback. So we've got a quick poll I'm going to launch.
By the way, on the poll, everyone has to play, right, David? That's the rule?
That's right. Everyone plays. So I want to know, how do you gather feedback today? So go ahead and select all that apply on here on your poll here. I just want to know, is it a short phone call, automated call, maybe like a lot of groups do with, please hold for a short call, question or a short survey following your call. Some organizations automate an email going out after a call. Some feedback is, periodic, like every 6 months we, send something out to our customer base just to get a pulse on how we're doing on things. And then of course, do you have a process to harness informal feedback? And when you look at the informal feedback, this is one that I say most organizations don't do a great job at. And I want a little dialogue on this with the group here, because when you're looking at the informal feedback channel, what I always encourage groups to do do is, in leadership, you need to view your frontline agents, your frontline employees as your eyes and ears. So they're your eyes and ears. And I'll share the results here so you can see we've got, a handful of people doing the phone call, most doing email or a good portion, and then informal feedback channel. But when you look at that informal feedback side of it, it means, do your employees, if a customer were to provide some feedback and maybe a suggestion on how to improve something, and that employee were to bring it up the chain to a leader, is the leader going to take that and do something with it? Or are they basically going to have the attitude, like unfortunately a lot of leaders do, that, okay, we know better. We know what we're doing up here in leadership. And so that's one thing that I really, with all my clients, I encourage them to really be looking at their employees as their eyes and ears. They're your physical hands out there working with your client. So I'll pause there for just a moment and just get some thoughts on how you guys feel about informal feedback channels. I think we all are doing something on the surveying, but is this an area that you'd agree with most of the people I talk to, that we need some improvement in this area? Because that's what I hear from most of my clients, is they don't do a great job of having a formal channel to get that feedback up the chain.
Hey, what's interesting today is, like, people are, I agree with you, and I think this is a great topic about getting the feedback from the employees, because, for instance, in my last company, we use that to actually identify, this is voice of the customer, right? Specifically, a whole new product idea we hadn't even thought of based off the customer feedback, which was great. So it's like, to your point, the more, feedback we get that's informal, that really is on point, really helps a lot. What I think is going to be interesting as we go forward, and, maybe you're going to get into this topic, but, now with the Gen AI and all that, there are good insights that are being gleaned by, the systems to tell you kind of some key information that you can use, not just from one or two reps, but from all of the calls, and you can get some good insights based off of those systems that do that.
Right. And we are going to talk about that. I want to get some feedback from people that are using AI to kind of filter their feedback. So looking at the next slide here, just reviewing some of the different measurements that I've used, and we went over this a few months back. But your typical call stats, your queue stats, your abandonment percentages, and then your overall customer sat measurements, and all those type of things. These are all just a lot of the things that probably every call center out there is doing a decent job of gathering. So I'm not going to spend time on that. But really what I want to focus on is this next point. And I love the rule of customer feedback gathering. If you don't have a plan to use this and respond to customer feedback, don't ask for it. So this is something I've always, whenever I give feedback, and if I fill out a comment form and put my name and phone number, and I have specific questions or comments and I never hear from the company, they just took a hit on the negative side. They would have been better off not asking for my feedback if they never intended to do anything with it. Any thoughts on that? Is that you guys have the same philosophy there, that if we're going to take the customer's time to gather information, gather feedback, then we better have a process for it?
David, can I add one thing to that? And that is, response is not just generic response back. It's almost more infuriating to get the, "Oh, we've heard you, thanks for your feedback," and then no action is taking place. I think it's that respond and then act on what you're hearing as well, either resolving that initial or that individual concern that's been raised, or acting on it as an overall theme on how to improve the company overall.
Right. Yeah, and getting back to feed people in a timely manner too. And I always say when you see feedback coming in, picture a stopwatch starting, and the clock's ticking, and the customers are potentially waiting for some response, some feedback. And I think I shared this before, but I had a customer we had set up their QA system for, and we're doing some surveys, and for the first week or two while I was training their QA manager, I was monitoring their feedback coming in off the real-time customer surveys. And I had it up on a screen while I was working, and I'd see them pop up and I'd read them. And I had one come up from a very large customer. It was about $1 million of business a year for this particular company. And they were furious at how something had been handled. And I immediately called my contacts at the company, and within 30 minutes, they called the guy. And we're on the phone with them talking through the issue. They had resolved the issue. They got it taken care of. And I talked to the customer later, and their response was, you know what? I didn't really think anyone was even going to look at this. I was ready to call your competitor and switch my business over the next week. But because you guys did respond, I'm going to give you another chance. So, responding in a timely manner is absolutely key for customer service and the whole feedback side of it. Any other thoughts on that?
I was going to add to it, David, that there's also a whole gold mine of verbatim comments that relate to the agents themselves, and aggregating that and putting it back into the agent's view is super important. In one company, we took over the wallpaper of the computers, and every morning, like, there would be a new best comment of the day, right? And the agent's name would be there, that she provided this great service and so forth. It was, it created a buzz.
No, I think that's great. And Lauren, what you're bringing up too is probably the biggest challenge with dealing with feedback. It takes time. It takes time, and there's so much volume potentially. If you're a large call center and you're getting feedback coming in, it takes time, but it is well worth it to dedicate resources to be your feedback champions and to be reviewing that and doing things like that. Because I guarantee you, when those agents see their name pop up on the screen with a quote attached to them, it's a motivator. And, we're always, in the call center world, you're always trying to do things to increase retention and get your employees and your agents to be, excited that they're working there and ready to come back. And that's a great way to do it. Any other thoughts on that? All right, so let's move forward there. So types of feedback, we have, 4 different categories here. You have your quantifiable scores. So this is a rating, whether you're using Net Promoter or something else. And I've got thoughts on Net Promoter if anyone wants to dialogue on that later. And Net Promoter, the challenge I have with it, it's such a wide range of 10 options that it's really an inaccurate tool to measure real customer sentiment. If you can't tell me what the difference is between a 6 and a 7, then you've got too many options. And the problem I have with a lot of clients is they start off by, they get this Net Promoter Score, and it's all they do is share the score. And that's all. And I'm like, that's just a portion of customer feedback that they need to be going over with people. So anyway, I'll get off my Net Promoter Score soapbox, because I know it's still a tool a lot of people use, and it can be used effectively if it's done right. But it's abused more often than not, I found. And I'll pause there to see if anyone wants to chime in and defend it, or tell them maybe how your organization is using that to gather feedback and distribute it. Any comments, thoughts? Agree, disagree? So when you're looking at the different types, you got your quantifiable scores, you've got your trends on key areas. So what I also like to look at is, what happens. Like, we would take, for one of my clients, we got some feedback that our communication during the repair process, this was a manufacturing client, was very poor. And so what we did is we took some initiatives and started doing it. So we started watching that particular question and plotting it month over month as we did all our surveying, and we could see, okay, is what we're doing, is the change we're making, did it make a difference? Did it move the mark at all? And sure enough, it did. And then we would watch it and see, okay, it's starting to dip again. What's going on? And so you're looking at trends to kind of gauge, are we doing the right things? Are we moving in the right direction with things? And then you have averages, averages by maybe you have 4 or 5 categories on a more lengthy monthly survey or a quarterly survey. You're looking at, okay, communication may be one category. How are we doing overall in that area? Maybe it's in communication with, the company and with the call center, is their level of knowledge of the subject matter, how are we doing in that particular category? And then you have the other area that I always say 50% of the value of any feedback is in the comments. So looking at your feedback from your comments, and the challenge you have here, and this is where I want to pause and see if anyone has any automated AI tools or otherwise that they're using to really sort through comments. Because if you're a large organization and you're getting thousands of potential feedback coming in, it's daunting to try to sift through that and figure out what really matters and what you need to act on and what you do. So
Hey, David, I'll chime in. Not automated wise, but I will say like what we did is we took the comments and identified kind of the most, I'll say, common, issues that came up in comments, and we categorized them, and we just did a manual sort based off of that and started, to your point about trending, identifying how we're doing against those issues in the comments.
So it was still someone manually reading these and highlighting them and, going through.
Yeah, well, using a little bit of Excel, knowledge, but it was manual. But yeah, we didn't do it automated yet.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other ways that you found effective to analyze the written or the comment feedback? Does anyone else struggle with that like most people do? It's a challenge. I mean, you get comments coming in, and then if you're not watching them, you'll miss some, like the one I mentioned earlier with my client, and you miss a huge opportunity. So the feedback side of it is important, getting that comment and reading it and being able to categorize it, and just like Adam said, being able to put them into buckets of themes of what we're seeing with the comment feedback coming back.
And we've always read every comment manually, but if you're going to do that, you may as well disposition them so you can search them later.
Yep. Yeah, that's one thing. We've got some tools too that we've used some places where we will, as you're reading the comments, there's a pick list of, these are the categories it falls into. And that way, if you're going to take the time to read it, you're right. Let's go ahead and do a little analysis to where we can bring it back up quickly. And if you're looking for quotable comments, for your agents, that's another one. As you're reading it, you just quickly flag that particular comment as something that you want to come back to later. So responding to customer feedback. So again, the automated feedback, and someone already mentioned that, yeah, that's fine, but if you're not going to do anything with it, is it more irritating? But at least getting some sort of we appreciate your feedback, but really where you can make a huge victory with a client if you send them some feedback and say, hey, I read your comments. We're going to discuss that at our meeting next week, or, something of that sort. And then especially if you make a change in your process or your services, just letting them know that, hey, your comment spurred us to start looking at that. And we actually are doing something about that area. So, and you might not do that with every feedback item that comes in, but pick a few of them every week and respond to the customer and tell them that, and the word spreads. People get that information and they say, wow, they actually listened to me and that they did something with it. And that's really, a key part there. And then the urgent response for upset customers. So, and there are tools out there, and I want to see if anyone has used any of the newer tools that let you really look at sentiment. I know we do them live on calls for quite a few call centers, but
David, I have more of a question, but have you seen like good examples of the tools being able to identify sentiment? Like that's really interesting. Like, are they able to identify like people's feelings?
yeah, anyone have any experience with that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't have experience using it, but I've watched a demo through it through one of their vendors, but it was really interesting. What I liked about what they did is they looked at the sentiment from not only the agent experience, but especially if you have to hand it off to possibly another department, like a field technician or somebody like that had to go end to end. They looked at that whole experience and then brought that back with the sentiment analysis. And from the examples they showed me, it was pretty impressive, but of course it was a demo.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Any other feedback on that? And again, the whole area here is the volume. If you're a large call center getting feedback in on a pretty high volume, it's daunting to try to sift through it all and make sense of it.
David, question for you. This is Jag. Again, no fancy tool for comments. I would say we don't have anything. I would say Excel, to the mention earlier, is probably something that gets utilized. Can you share a little bit more about how do you see the value of sentiment showing up as you're looking at the results of customer feedback? Like, is that like more of it's another correlating factor to how this interaction the outcome of that interaction, and so if you notice frustration, so I'm just kind of trying to play that out a little bit. Can you give us maybe an example?
Yeah,
of how you might use?
Definitely, Jag. So looking at the sentiment side of things, and just whether you do it manually or you've got some automated tools to help you with it, it's really identifying, putting it into two buckets of, is this customer happy or is this customer discontent? And then from there, looking at it, and I'll give you an example of how we dealt with this at one of my companies. We actually took comments, and we would take an assortment of comments, and we actually gave them to maybe a dozen comments and dozen surveys to each member of the executive team. And every week they had to read through those, and they were responsible for responding to the customer. It was awesome. I mean, it got the executive out of their office thinking and really looking at it and connecting with the customer. And boy, some of them got so excited about it because the reaction they got from an average customer when, hey, this is Joe, I'm CEO of such and such company, I read your feedback. Wow. I mean, it was really a great exercise, and we just kept going. It became part of our regular work process for them. But Jag, I think really looking at it is it's really quickly sorting it into ones that maybe you need to look at closely for a reaction and response that you need to get back to them, or maybe it's positive feedback that you can use then to encourage your agents and other members of your team. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on that particular area?
David, I want to riff a little bit on what Jag said there. I know we're talking about feedback, and that's the core of today, but some of the interesting things that I'm seeing now are in that around sentiment. Jag brought up sentiment, and it's that agent assist and using underlying tools that discern the live call and the customer sentiment during that call, and can start to prompt the agent with how to handle a certain situation, or phrases to use, or agent assist that I think we all know about. That sentiment is so much better just in the last couple of months, really, but really, in the last year or so. And so while I know we're talking about feedback, there's also that use of sentiment right there at the moment that you're co-creating that experience with the customer.
Yep, definitely, Rick. Thank you for that feedback there on that, because that is definitely a tool. And I think there's probably another topic for another day, but just how so much of that and so much how the AI world, I've had some interesting discussions with some call center professionals in the last week. And the topic was, okay, with all this stuff with AI and some of the stuff going on, what's the future of a level 1 agent? And so maybe that's another topic, another day, but it's getting some interesting dialogue out there in the world, in the call center world.
Oh yeah, that's a primary topic nowadays. It seems like. One quick point to that, going back to Jag's point about the sentiment, is that what I like about this, is the volume and the expanse of a process from end to end. Now you get all the way from, using those tools, you get, okay, how did they handle in your omni-channel experience? Maybe there was a chat or there was something there, and then it moved on to your agent experience, and then it moved on to maybe, service technician or something like that. But by the time you get done, you have a full end-to-end view of what's going on in your process all the way from the customer journey. And that gives you better insight that you can share with other people and improve your business.
Right. No, good thoughts, Adam. So moving forward on the reviewing feedback, and this is one here. So with several of our groups, we have taken automated feedback that comes in on surveys. So the score type data, the quantifiable data, And when we set a threshold that, say it was a 5-point scale, if we get scores below a 2.8 or something like that, it was going to automatically trigger an email to our quality team. And they were going to look at that and be notified, or it shows up in a report immediately. And same thing, we looked at individual questions being out of range, and then we looked at a category. So if communication or language skills is one of your categories, then when we get a score below a certain amount, we're going to automatically flag that for review. And then if your overall survey is out of range, and then looking at the comments, when we were reviewing comments, we would immediately flag those for follow-up. So that reviewing feedback, and again, there's really not a magic answer for a lot of this. It takes time and it takes resources to go through, but I would say I think it's well worth the investment in resources to have someone that's focused on the whole feedback mechanism and coordinating that. Any questions, thoughts on this slide? So one of the next things I want to go over is a kind of an extension of the feedback side, and that's what I call case management. So I do a lot of work with Salesforce.com, and one of the things we use with most of our clients are the cases. And so I would say a case is something you would create if it's not a one and done, immediate, a single call type thing, but it's something that requires some feedback. Maybe it's some research to determine an answer to something. Then you open up a case. And then you start tracking those. And in the process that I set up in a lot of my clients is we will have regular case review meetings, and members from the leadership from each department in the company show up and we review the open cases. It's a quick process. I mean, we go through them pretty quickly, but we are not allowed to close those cases. No individual is allowed to close a case except for in that meeting. And so they go through the process, they review this, they're looking at every department can see what their impact was, and something that happened, an upset customer and what went on there. And then you're also able to track your status of watching it. So if you have a case that's been open longer than X number of weeks, then it shows up on a report and you're flagging it. But, that just keeps you, because we all get busy and things drop through the cracks. And so really the creating some sort of a case management system is a way to keep those things from dropping through the cracks. So I'll pause there for a minute. Any thoughts that any of the groups use that with their call centers to track the things that are a little bit more involved that require feedback?
David, have you ever seen situations where people use like cases like that were positive to like as a teachable moment, or is it mostly just working through like problems?
Most of the time, and I guess it's just indicative of the way we think a lot of times, but it's problems. It's feedback. Now, if there's really, there are other processes in place to identify, like Lon was saying the positive side of agents and stuff going on there. But most of the time, our cases are opened. It's something broken, something that needs to be fixed, something that we need to respond to a customer, something of that sort. And again, you don't have to get fancy with, a CRM. You can do it on Excel if you're a smaller organization. The key is someone's watching it and you're tracking it, and you've got a process to ensure that it just doesn't go away on its own.
No, I really like this, David, because I think it's, I always call it operationalizing something, right? So it's just making sure that you're closing the loop, closing the end part of this. And I love the fact that you can't actually close your case until you've reviewed it with the team. I think that provides a lot of accountability and creates a good insight for everybody in that meeting, so that, I'm sure a lot of different departments are involved with that, but it gets everybody kind of on board with, that identification of the issue. But the other thing I was just going to mention too is that, nope, I lost my train of thought. Can't tell you.
All right. If he comes back into the station, just holler.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
And so looking at process review and improvement, a couple of just key points there is involve your team. That's something we always tried to do, is we'd pull it, and every week in our case review meeting, we'd have department heads, but they'd bring one person with them to sit in on the meeting, a different person every time. And they would come in, and so that way they got the insight into seeing, okay, this customer feedback really is important. And quite often it is really interesting. to sit there and watch the meeting, and those frontline team members, more often than not, they're the ones that came up with the answers. And they're the ones that had great solutions. So looking at that and then recording and tracking your improvement efforts and review all those key processes periodically. And I'm going to share a little worksheet here that I developed years ago. So one of the things I always ask is, are you better 3 months from 3 months ago? Can you look back and say, I'm better today than I was 3 months ago? Every quarter, are you making improvements, or is it pretty much stagnant? And so one of the things that I've developed that has helped that is I call it process improvement worksheets. And I'm big on the Six Sigma work processes and continuous improvement. And this is something there that you're looking at, and we're going to distribute this. Anyone who wants a copy of this Word document, Maggie will send it out following the call. But it's something it's something we've used too at offsite meetings where we want to just take 30 minutes, and every table is going to pick a process and you're going to dissect it and look at it. So what we do is you record the name of the process, who are the primary and secondary participants, what initiates that process in your workflow, the timing, any systems that are used, the inputs, the prerequisites, and then you go through and document some of the steps in that process. And then this is where we have the dialogue and the discussion. What's working well? What needs to be improved? And what are some ultimate recommendations that the group just came up with during your dialogue? And, so it just gets you a way to constantly be looking at your work process and what you're doing there. Any groups do something similar on some of your work processes? And with your call centers, how integrated are you with your operations side of the house? Are they open to hearing and getting that feedback when you guys collect and get information? Do they want to know what to improve? Because I think some of the call centers that I've seen, that they may provide feedback, but the manufacturing side has this attitude of, or the operations side of the house, well, we know what we're doing. We got it. And they're not interested in getting that feedback from the call center side of the house, the customer facing people.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that in our company. We know how to kind of fix their processes, but they don't always like what we have to say.
Yep. No, I think that's probably true with a lot of groups, that there's not a connection there between the two. And that's why, having a review meeting like that, where you got operations people in the room, you got call center people in the room, and you're going over your key feedback elements. And then, ideally, if you've got a top 10 list, and someone mentioned, you kind of rank them as frequency of what's coming up, you pick off the top 1 or 2 things, and you got a little work team off trying to solve them. And then hopefully next month, when you get back together and you go over it again, those aren't your top items anymore. You got something new up there to work on. So it's just a constant cycle of continuous improvement that you can work through. Any other comments, thoughts on that?
Yeah, David, as always, I got one. I think going back to the operations versus the, customer service teams, one of the things that we did to kind of combat that or to solve that would be was to create shared KPIs, because you get what you measure, right? So the more that you kind of have their buy-in to, this is a performance measurement for us as a company, and we all have a part in this, I think it's that it really helps that conversation.
Yep. Definitely. Any other comments, thoughts on the integration of the departments at your organization?
David, I'd probably make a comment. I actually live on the operations side, and what's big for me is the voice of the customer, right? And in this case, the employee, and getting them involved in that problem solving process, and looking at what recommendations they may have that may help improve a process. But I think what we find big is, or what's been really helpful engaging employees, is that buy-in, right? When you get to change management and you start to look at how are you going to drive adoption of this change, the sooner that you can get folks involved and start to leverage that voice of the customer, I think it just really helps that whole process from one end from an idea to implementation.
So let me ask you to give some feedback. So you come from the operations side of the house. For those that are more on the call center, the customer facing feedback side of it, how do you recommend that they work with the operations to get them interested in working together as a single team? Any feedback about how you built that relationship between the two groups?
You know, what's been interesting, again, I would say by no means an expert at this. I think what's been really interesting is, to me, it starts with, you know, customers first. And in the operations side, again, one of the mentalities that I inspire with my teams is our customers, the folks that we support on that front line. And whether it's you know, portfolio management, analytics, training, so on and so forth, the customer is that employee, the customer is the caller. And so to me, I think it starts with just getting, I think a lot of people don't understand, who do I go to for this specific situation? And the first thing is identifying who those stakeholders are. Who can you go to find who can do this change? Like, I've got this system thing I want to do. Most of the time, people don't know who to go to. Who can I reach out to? And so, to me, I think doing some work on identifying and mapping what are the different processes, what are the different systems, so on and so forth. And that, again, sometimes that's already lives in documentation, but identification of who are those stakeholders is something that I'd recommend to folks. If you don't know, go ask around. Finding that right person sometimes can be hard, but once you find them, you find that it's easier to get work done. You find that it's much easier to get work done. That would be a suggestion, but I think it really comes down to me, just the way that I lead my teams. I want them to be listening to the voice of the customer, and that includes our customers calling in, but our employees as well. That's where the best ideas will come.
Yep, great. Well, Jack, I would say that's probably not the norm out there with a lot of companies. So that there's a definite disconnect between the groups. And even when I was taking over some of my call centers at Disney, one of the centers I was looking at, they would get an influx of all these calls on a certain day. And I'm a big data person. So I was looking at the data and saying, okay, why are we getting a spike of calls on the 4th day of every month? And I started asking them, and they said, well, accounting sends out this stuff to all the members of our timeshare programs. And there's a sentence in there that's so confusing, we have to explain that every caller that calls in. And I asked my agents, I said, has anyone gone and talked to the people who generate this letter? Oh, no, they don't care. Sure enough, they did care. Yeah. And they just had, you know, unfortunately, the call center has been beaten down by so many organizations as not having a seat at the top table. And we went up and talked to accounting. I took a couple of my agents with me, and they explained what they hear on the phone. And guess what? They changed the sentence in that our call volume went to nothing on that topic the next month. But it had been going on for a year. And no one thought to go upstairs to accounting to address it. So it's, you know, it's really that whole attitude of, you know, let's work together and getting those teams. And that's why those case management meetings are really helpful, because it's getting people from all the operation side of the house, the customer facing side of the house, and you're all working together to try to understand how to solve a problem. And it's really a great resource allocation tool to figure out, you know, okay, how do I need to work together better with this team? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I got one. Sorry to keep barging in here, but Jag just brought up something that really triggered a thought of a process that I think operationalizes this entire thing as well. We called, you know, I think his point about, you know, who do I go to for what problem? And, you know, it's really important on 2 levels that he just said that I think was really interesting. One of them was that his view with his team is that, you know, the people that we support, our customers, are the people that are on the front line supporting the overall customers. I think that was a really great point, because it's so important that as a company, we do a good job making sure people understand how they impact the overall mission, right? So it's important that they understand that that's their role, and that's something that, you know, benefits everybody. And I think the second piece was really the pathways to participate. People have to be really clear to understand how to participate, who to go to for what. And so one of the things that we had created in my last company was, we called it the PIT crew, the process improvement team. And this was a whole thing where it's just, you submit the idea to just a kind of a central mailbox, so to speak. And then the people that are owners of that process, so it might be the manager of that department, for instance, once a month we're doing a full review and we're looking at how easy is this to implement that change or that request, or, how long is it going to take for us to do, and how important, what's the biggest impact, right? So we did some kind of review off of that, but that really gave us a good kind of opportunity to make sure we're hearing all the ideas and that we're coming back to the reps with, hey, we implemented your idea. Here's a little, recognition for that. And it could be anything, but whether it be customer feedback or whether it be something else, to improve our operation.
Yep, no, great. But again, as I said, can you ask yourself, are we better now than you were last quarter? And is your goal to have that culture of continuous improvement? Are you always looking to get better, or are you in survival mode? Are you just trying to get through the month and get through month-end, processes or whatever your busy period of the month is? So that's kind of the thoughts there. Any discussion, questions, comments for anyone on the call here? We got a lot of experts in your own areas there in your own call centers on handling feedback, on making feedback really work for your organization.
I'm going to share your dislike of Net Promoter Score.
Okay.
I'm definitely a CSAT guy myself, and I like to do it on a even numbered scale, so that customers have to land on one side of the line or the other. There's no middle ground. Either you're on the positive side or not. I was in an organization, I'll name it Ticketmaster, that had a really bad reputation and some bad, customer sentiment. And we went after surveying every phone order, and got a lot of, verbatims back, but we used the data to just make it so visible that no one could hide from it in the call center, all the way down to the agent level. All the supervisors had a score, the agents had a score, managers had a score, teams had a score. There was no escape. And we used that to push and push and push to make that go better. And it lit quite a fire under a lot of people, and we made a tremendous amount of progress.
That's awesome. Hey, can I ask the group a question? And maybe Lauren, you might know the answer to this, or David. Is there a impact on quality of response from the feedback from your customers based off of when you ask them? So is it right after the call? Is it, if you ask, if you send out say an email survey 2 weeks later, is there some impact there related to the timeliness? We found some interesting data that way.
Yeah, I think that the closer you can get to the event, the better, and the more likely you get feedback. And then I didn't really talk about this, but when you're designing, there's a whole bunch of work to design surveys effectively. I mean, if you're going to open a survey and it's not on one screen and they can do it in less than a minute, you're not going to get people to respond. So people that open that survey and it scrolls to a second page, they're going to say, no, thanks, I don't have time for that.
Totally. Yeah.
And so, but you can design a survey with a little nested question with multiple choice answers on there, or a rating, or whatever you do, with 2 or 3 pieces of feedback you're trying to gather. And that's great. You're much better off doing a very short, simple survey than doing some real long, complex one that you don't get any answers. You don't get any feedback and no responses. So there's a whole art to designing surveys effectively.
And survey frequency also is a big factor, Adam. So if every single time, if a customer's getting a survey request from you every 2 weeks, or they just answered a survey and now here comes another one, the fatigue of that, so you need to be strategic about how often you send them out. But I've seen some tech lately that is using, speech to text to understand whether or not the customer should receive a survey, have they responded before, and maybe even tailor the survey to them based upon the content of the call.
Yeah, great.
Because people are
One
going
of
to
my
generally
clients,
respond to one of two ends of the spectrum. Either they're really ticked off about something, or they really had a great experience. And the people that have that middle of the road are not going to respond 80% of the time.
yeah, one of my clients had a lot of success with text surveys. So right after the call, a text went out to that person, and they got a response.
And that's becoming more and more prominent out there with the texting and people's acceptance of the SMS technology. I mean, it's not new technology, but it is, getting, and the beauty of that is if you've got a good texting system, you can design it to, branch and do whatever you want to with your responses. So if they respond a certain way, you can send it off into a different set of questions if you want to ask 2 or 3 more questions. And we use a lot of times to initiate service calls. If someone says that they're still having a problem after the call,
Right.
then we'll initiate a call back out to them saying, hey, I saw you just replied and your problem wasn't resolved. How can we help you? And boy, when we get those people on the phone, they're like, wow, I'm shocked. I didn't realize you guys were really going to do anything about that feedback.
Yeah. As you say, this is how you grow your reputation. They'll
Yep.
talk about that on social media.
Yeah, they do more so now than ever. People will put it out there on social media. So you can do a lot of great things with how you handle just a few people's feedback.
Absolutely.
Because feedback is it's really important for an organization, and it's just a great motivator too for your staff when they see things happening and you guys are listening to feedback and you're listening to your frontline agents and you're able to make adjustments and changes, and they see their ideas being implemented. I mean, it's part of building that culture that people want to come to work every day.
Yeah, I think that was definitely like my biggest takeaway is how like you can create a positive feedback loop between like taking in your customers' feedback and then like boosting your employees and making sure that they feel like they're doing a good job. Like that really resonated with me. And I think what everybody said also like supported that as well. So that's great to see.
I was going to add, David, you asked me a question earlier. How do you, continue to engage operations? I think as you think about, contact center environment, right? There are costs, right? And as you think of engaging, especially these ideas will generate return on investment. And one of the ways you can engage these leaders is you can quantify a lot of this information. I've gotten this many calls that relate to this pain point with this handle time, and you can turn that into a dollar amount. If I can improve this by X, I can gain this back in cost savings. And so as another tool or technique is how do you start to shape that business case when you're interacting with that operations leader? Come in with that ROI. So to me, I think there's just value there that you can start to lead with, and especially the agents, right, who take these calls in and out. They know how often they get these calls. There's ways to measure that and obviously handle time and all. So I think that's just another suggestion for the group is how do you pull that business case together?
No, I think that's great. And as a call center professional, getting that feedback and providing that into the operations side of the house is important. I mean, give you another example. I have a call center that's that handles insurance claims and insurance product discussions and stuff like that. And we started collecting all the data on the different sales entities that would sell and represent these different products. And we were able to quantify the ones we got the most complaint calls about. And sure enough, they went back and started filtering out the ones that really we were having all the complaints about and stopped using them to sell their product. And, a lot of improvements. So, I mean, but it took some analysis from the call center to say, okay, these are the ones we're getting the most complaints about. And then the operations side of the house took it and did something with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, if there's no other comments, I'd like to give a big thanks to David. This was a great way to kick off Town Hall for the year. I think we all learned a ton. So, and thank you to everybody who participated in the discussion. It's really great when everybody in the membership gives their insights. And speaking of events that are upcoming, we have a regional event happening in Florida in April. It is April 18th in Orlando. I'm going to send the link in the chat to RSVP. So if anybody is from the area and would like to go, these are great ways to meet your fellow members in person. And every time we have one, it's always very fun and very informative. So let me know. And it's also on the calendar on the website. So just let me know if you have any questions. Thank you again to David. We'll make sure everybody gets the recording and also the worksheet that David presented. So
All right. Thank you all.
Great job, David. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, David.
Bye. Thank you.
David, thank you so much.
Great topic.